This is Halo 3, 2 years into development. In this build of Halo 3, you can actually see the Master Chief having a transparent visor and even some parts of his face. Now, before you get your pitchforks out, this was probably for artists to make the proportions for the Spartans seem realistic, but what was happening at Bungie was far more bleak than fans have expected. After Halo 2 shipped, Bungie co-founder Jason Jones went on sabbatical, leaving the Halo 3 team with little direction or leadership. So with all that being said, just how did Bungie manage to pull off Halo 3, a game that is widely accepted as a perfect send-off to the classic Halo franchise, and one that Microsoft and 343 or Halo Studios hasn't been able to replicate since? I'm Pounder McNasty, and I dive into the development stories behind video games. If you enjoy the content this channel offers, I'd appreciate it if you took a moment to hit subscribe. Today, we dive into the development cycle of Halo 3. But before we dive into the prototype builds of Halo 3, we need to talk about how development of Halo 3 started. From late 2004 to early 2005, Halo 3 began pre-production. I like to call this stage the quiet phase. A small internal team began early planning and pre-production immediately following the release of Halo 2. This was done quietly because the majority of the studio was recovering from the infamous crunch required to finish Halo 2. As a quick reminder, Halo 2 was technically in development for 3 years, but the game that actually shipped was built in a frantic period of roughly 10 to 12 months, which forced Bungie to cut the entire third act. This is where Halo 3 picks up. Because Halo 2 ended so abruptly, the writing team had a weird problem. They had Act 3 of Halo 2 sitting in a drawer, but it wasn't enough to fill a whole new game. Much of 2005 was spent figuring out how to evolve the last act of Halo 2 into its own title. Bungie prioritized foundational stability over feature creep, ensuring that the engine was functional and the gameplay sandbox was locked down before they ever attempted to build the actual levels, which is why this early screenshot of a cut Halo 3 level looks exactly like it was made in Halo 2. They spent 2005 heavily modifying the existing Halo 2 code. They wanted a known quantity, so they wouldn't be surprised by hardware limitations 6 months before launch. Leadership implemented a milestone system during this phase to avoid the 2004 style collapse, which brings us to this roughly a year into production build of Halo 3. But before I dive into this crazy build of Halo 3, I wanted to take a moment to recognize today's sponsor, PlayTracker. PlayTracker is a platform that unifies every major gaming platform into one singular pane of glass, with one of the best features being a cross-platform game library tracker. Nowadays, there's so many different platforms, and all of them have different achievement systems. PlayTracker unifies them all into one single app. You can browse, organize, and label your full library in one place regardless of where you bought the game. But here's where it gets really cool. PlayTracker gamifies your game library. You earn XP, level up, and unlock rewards no matter where you play. You can even show off your all-time favorites in the Hall of Fame slots on your profile. And for the co-op gamers out there, they even have a parties feature, which lets you share the credit for achievements earned with your friends, so nobody gets left out. And if you're currently addicted to Baldur's Gate 3 like I am, you can even see recommendations for games that will scratch similar itches based on audience match scores. PlayTracker is available as a website as well as a Windows desktop PC app, with the team working on a mobile application as we speak. And because it's developed by a small team in the EU, they actually care about your privacy. Their privacy notice page is short, clear, and doesn't hide behind any legalese. You can give PlayTracker a spin with the link in the description or in the pinned comments down below. And again, a massive thank you to PlayTracker for sponsoring this video. But going back to this build of Halo 3, this is a very special build because it was the first ever time Bungie had experimented with what we now know as Forge. Many weapons used Halo 2 models as placeholders, including the battle rifle and the rocket launcher. We also have a cut mechanic, like the leaning system Bungie was testing out. While the animation was present, the bullets didn't really track accurately to the tilted camera, and Bungie ultimately scrapped it. And of course, this build also had the cut missile launcher. It functioned like a lock-on rocket launcher for vehicles, but ultimately, the Spartan laser would be chosen in the final release. Again, this build is very important. At this stage, Bungie was still finding the fun and heavily experimenting. Far from being locked down, the game was still a messy construction site where many features were being tested and ultimately thrown away. One big thing that Bungie was working on since the very beginning was an overhaul to the lighting system. Even in the earliest screenshots of Halo 3, you can tell how much they wanted to dedicate to the lighting in this game. But in this build, you can still see that it needed some time to bake, no pun intended. Notice how in this build, the Spartan armor has a much higher specular value, making them kinda look like action figures. As I mentioned earlier, Bungie was focused on foundational stability. They knew they couldn't survive another Halo 2 collapse. By fixing the lighting and the physics early, they gave the designers a safe playground, which is how a lot of this jankiness was fixed. As a reminder, this build is from 2006, and the game would launch just 1 year later. And just to really hammer in how collected Bungie was during the development of Halo 3, this is the game just 4 months after the previous build. We are now only 2 months away from the public beta and 6 months from launch. This build cut out a lot of things Bungie was experimenting with. The leaning/peaking mechanic from the alpha is gone, and the missile launcher is cut, just to name a few. This Delta build is also where we see the first functional version of theater mode. While the leadership at Bungie checked out, the engineers were building a system that would allow every player to become their own director. Which is a bit ironic. A game with a leaderless story was building the best tools for users to tell their own. As the team moved through the Delta phase in March of 2007, the atmosphere of Bungie was a pressure cooker. They were prepping for the public beta, knowing that millions of eyes were about to judge their work. And in May of 2007, the golden ticket had arrived. To get into the Halo 3 beta, you had to buy a copy of Crackdown, a move that single-handedly turned a new IP into a million seller overnight. But the 1.5 million people who flooded the servers, this was one of the world's first looks at next-gen Halo, and the reception was surprisingly polarized. Critics called it Halo 2.5, complaining that the visuals didn't quite hit the Gears of War standard, but the gameplay told a different story. The beta was a massive balancing test. This is where we first dealt with the flare, a piece of equipment so blindingly unfun in the beta that the community's collective scream forced Bungie to effectively bury it in the final release. We saw the first look at the Spartan laser and realized it was nearly impossible to aim, leading to a last-minute buff that turned it into the vehicle shredding icon we know today. But more importantly, this beta was the debut of saved films. Even in its most primitive state, players were already breaking the game just to capture peak gameplay moments, proving that while the committee at Bungie was struggling with the story, the engineers had accidentally built the world's greatest social network. The beta was a massive success, but it also cemented a realization for Bungie. They were excellent at building Halo, but they were tired of it. 12 million hours logged by fans in just 3 weeks proved that the monster they created was bigger than them. As the beta closed in June of 2007, the studio went into final crunch. But unlike Halo 2's crunch, which was about survival, this one was about legacy. They knew that this was their last chance to get the Chief right before they handed the keys over to 343. Which leads us to the final months of development, the Epsilon build, and the moment the studio finally pulled the trigger on their independence. By August of 2007, the game was essentially done, but Bungie wasn't ready to let go just yet. They released the Epsilon build, a near final version to select Microsoft employees for one last stress test. And with that, just 1 month later, Halo 3 launched on September 25th, 2007.
The wait is finally over.
From coast to coast, gamers lined up to get their hands on this little package, Halo 3.
Halo 3 is here.
If it's a big day for gamers, it's a million times bigger for Microsoft. Its Halo series is one of the most successful video game franchises in history.
It completely stopped the world. Entertainment executives blamed a dip in movies ticket sales that week on the game. It grossed $170 million in the United States in just 24 hours. But 6 days after the launch, Bungie dropped the ultimate bombshell. They were splitting from Microsoft. They had built the perfect game, and their reward was their freedom. This is the central mystery of Halo 3. How did a leadership committee of burnt-out developers create a masterpiece that the billions of dollars at 343 Industries haven't been able to touch since? Well, looking through these builds paints a very nice picture of how Bungie worked and why 343 failed. 343 inherited the technical debt of the old Bungie engine. What was foundational stability for Bungie became a nightmare of ancient code for the new team. Bungie also understood that Halo was a social shooter. Halo 3 succeeded because of Forge, Theater, and the custom games community. Features that 343 often treated as a secondary post-launch addition rather than the core of the game. And as we saw with the Pimps at Sea build, Halo 3 was born from experimentation and jank. It had a personality that came from a team finding the fun, rather than a corporate office trying to hit the metrics. Halo 3 remains the high watermark of the franchise, not because it was perfect, but because it was the last time the series felt like a group of friends trying to make the coolest thing possible before they closed the door on Master Chief's saga. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.